Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay Douglas, and this is my 8th practice speech. I'd like to thank you all for joining me tonight. I know you're all cold and tired and want to get home, so I won't take up too much of your time. But I'd just like to take maybe 5-6 minutes of it and tell you why we should all have sexual education be required in courses in public school systems. Did you know that according to a statistic provided from DoSomething.org, that 750,000 girls from ages 15 to 19 become pregnant every year, and that boys and girls ages 15 to 19 contract 19 million STIs annually? Does that statistic scare you? Because it kind of scares me. So today I'm going to convince you why sexual education should be required in all schools. To do this, I'm going to go over why and how sexual education helps prevent teen pregnancies, prevents the spread of STIs, and finally teaches teenagers how to use contraceptions in an effective and safe manner. So let's begin with our first point, which is that sexual education courses help prevent teen pregnancy. And this one is kind of an obvious one, but it's important to state anyway. If we educate our teenagers on sex and how to have it safely, then they will obviously use that information, and they will apply it to their lives. On when and how they decide to have sex, they will remember what we taught them, and hopefully use a safe for them and a safe for their partner way of having sexual intercourse. Did you know that teens who receive a comprehensive education about sex are 50% less likely to have an unintended pregnancy than those who receive sexual education that are abstinence-only programs or contraception-only programs, a statistic provided from DoSomething.org. In a national study of 1,719 15 to 19-year-olds nationwide, done by the Sexuality Information Education Council of the United States, found that receiving information about birth control in a formal sex education setting was associated with a 50% lower risk of teenage pregnancies when compared to receiving information only on abstinence or not receiving any information at all. And it was also confirmed through this same study that talking to young people about birth control does not lead to increased sexual activity, as some would have you believe. So now we can move on to our second point, which is that sexual education classes help prevent the spread of STIs. An STI, or sexually transmitted infection, is a disease that is passed from an infected person to another infected person through sexual intercourse. A review of 48 research studies done by the Center for Disease Control, or the CDC, found that about 2/3 of HIV STI prevention programs studied had a significant impact on reducing sexual risky behaviors, including a delay in first sexual intercourse, a decline in the number of sex partners, and an increase in condom or contraceptive use. A 2012 study done by the Guttmacher Institute found that more knowledge about sexual health and contraceptives was directly correlated to a decrease in adolescent and young adult risky sexual behaviors, such as having sexual intercourse without condoms or other types of contraceptives. And it also correlated to a decrease in the number of sexual partners a person was likely to have. And another study done by the CDC found that the states with the highest STD rates also had a direct link to the states that only taught abstinence-only programs, which is not a coincidence, obviously. Young people who receive only abstinence educations from their schools tend to engage in riskier sexual behaviors because they haven't learned. They haven't learned about the safe ways to have sex. So they're curious, or they don't know how to have safe sex because they were never taught. So of course they engage in those risky sexual behaviors. That's just a fact. Finally, we can move on to our last point, which is that sex ed classes help teach you how to use contraceptives safely. Research done by Robert E. Slavin says that sex education programs show that the most effective courses are those that emphasize both abstinence only and the use of condoms and other prevention materials, rather than just abstinence alone or nothing at all. He also argues that only giving adolescent knowledges is not a sufficient course. We must also provide them with condoms and accurate incentives to use them. must also be provided so that they see the benefits of actually using them. The following information in this last bullet point that I'm going to give you comes from another study done by the Gmascher Institute, which studies and advocates for the advancement of sexual and reproductive health all across the nation. So, compared with Canada, English, French, and Swedish peers, the United States teens have a similar level of sexual activity compared to their teenage counterparts. But the United States teens are more likely to have shorter and less consistent sexual relationships, and are less likely to use contraceptives, especially the pill or dual methods. The majority, 86% of teens, of the decline in teenage pregnancy rates was the result of dramatic improvements in contraceptive use, including an increase in the proportion of teens that use a single method of contraception. Just one method is all it takes to bring the rate of teen pregnancies down to 86% of all of the cases. To summarize my presentation tonight, we have discussed the sexual education classes should be required in all schools because they help prevent teen pregnancy, help prevent the spread of STIs, and finally teach teens how to use contraceptive methods wisely and effectively. My purpose in giving this speech tonight was to persuade all of you to write your school board, write your government, and implore them to have sexual education courses be required in all schools. Remember the study done by the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States that I mentioned a few bullets earlier? Well, in their study, they also confirmed that abstinence only until marriage programs are not effective in changing young people's sexual behaviors or preventing them from having sex at all. More importantly, however, it confirms that programs that teach young people about both abstinence and contraceptive disease prevention are, in fact, most effective. Thank you, and have a great night.